Hey, this is Christian Buckley with another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here today with Rene. Hey, good to see you.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been able to talk. Of course, you see people online, we see each other's profiles, I see the little tiny picture, come up as we respond back and forth to different things, but it's great to connect with you again after a while.
Yeah, it's been quite some time. Glad to be here.
So why don't you introduce yourself, like who you are, what you do, where you are, all those kinds of details.
Yeah, okay, sure. So my name is Rene Modery. I'm an Office Apps and Service MVP. It's in my 8th year now. I'm based in Singapore. I've been living here for quite a long time, actually. And I'm actually not Singaporean, obviously. So I come from Germany. But a long time ago, I decided to come here, work a bit with a product called SharePoint, and things didn't really change that much overall in the past 3 years. So still here, still working a lot with SharePoint, obviously now also in the cloud a lot. So for quite some time now in the cloud.
I don't know if anybody told you this. So SharePoint is not just in Singapore. It's in other parts of the world as well.
We'll make sure that everybody knows about it. And
that's true.
Actually, it's the other way around. Things might be moving a bit slower here than elsewhere. But yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Well, it's great to see you and talk to you again. So kind of so I know that so I've known you for many years through various events, and I don't know how much you're still traveling around speaking at conferences.
Not so much anymore these days. Got 2 young kids, so focus a lot on family right now. So traveling is really on a very local or regional level, meaning if I travel to Hong Kong, for example, that's already a bigger travel for me, whereas traveling to the US or Europe is usually not the case anymore. That also means any kind of events or so that I'm attending are really, you could say, directly in Singapore or, for example, like I mentioned, Hong Kong or anywhere else here in Asia. Microsoft got some conferences coming up, or also had conference previously with the annual Ignite the Tour and other smaller things. Then sometimes we've got user groups or other conferences here. So yeah, that's what I'm usually doing. That's why we haven't seen each other, I think, in 5 years or so. It's been quite some time.
It's been that long. It's hard when you see people online. You kind of forget that, oh yeah, we haven't actually seen each other in person in that long. Did you do the last Ignite the Tour? Did you do any of those tour dates?
Yeah. So obviously home base here in Singapore, and that one is a must. So we have to submit and try to get there. Obviously, I was speaking here, and the other thing I did then was Hong Kong. We didn't have that many locations in Asia Pacific last year, but try to get to Hong Kong. Managed to get there. Sadly, fell sick after my first session or during my first session. So the second session I had to cancel, but at least one session done. And trying again.
Just first time frame for the recording of this, people will be watching this later, but so we're waiting for I think the selection of speakers for different locations for this next wave of events. I'm speaking at the Ignite conference in Orlando, but I'm really hoping to get picked up and do some of the other Ignite the Tour locations as well.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. I mean, I'm trying to do a lot here for my Singapore community. So I run the user group here, SharePoint and Office 65, organizing another conference here. But obviously in Asia Pacific, there are a lot more locations here who sometimes don't have as many MVPs or not as much support yet. So that's why I'm really looking forward to from my point of view, actually bigger Ignite the Tour, because now we've seen more locations here where they are. And obviously that means bigger reach, where you can reach more people and hopefully also make a bigger impact.
Well, with the user group, kind of what are the hot topics right now? What are people really interested in hearing more about, learning about right now?
So like I mentioned earlier, we're sometimes a bit slower here in Singapore when it comes to, for example, US or Europe. So people are getting really interested, obviously, in Power Apps, in the SharePoint framework. So in some things that other countries may consider, they've been around for quite some time. But here, while it's been around, while people started using it now, sometimes there's a phase where suddenly people start really get interested in it. And that was, what we've seen basically recently in the past 6 to 12 months, that people really want to see those newer technologies, asking for, hey, that Forms framework, new one, Power Apps, what can you do with it, etc. And obviously they don't want to just see, they obviously want to do something as well. So we're also trying to do a lot more hands-on stuff instead of just some guy standing there presenting about, this is how it should work, but really everyone get out your laptops. Now we're going to actually do some actual stuff, so that you actually see it in action, do it, and hopefully learn something by that approach.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same story, over here. And sometimes we think of ourselves like, I'm based in Salt Lake City, Utah, and are we kind of behind where other areas are? No, we're all moving at the speed of the cloud. We're getting the same features. It's not like Singapore doesn't have the exact same capabilities. I don't know what rings people are on, for the service, but like you have Paul and Ashley Colmsey out in Perth, Australia, who are at the forefront of what's going on with Power Apps and Flow and schooling MVPs in other parts of the world, including the US, on kind of how to go and build productivity solutions out of the solution. So it's, I think that it sounds like you guys are right where our user group is here locally, because there's just a ton that's happening in that area. So much so that we've rebranded our SharePoint Saturday. We're now calling it 365 Friday or Friday 365. I'm not sure about that switch, but we're going to, SharePoint being just one pillar of the topics that we're going to be covering, and moving from Saturday to Friday as well.
Yeah. So we actually also had our regular SharePoint user group, but obviously then there was more coming along, like Power Apps, Flow, many other things in Office 65. So the proper name right now, you could say, for our user group is SharePoint / or plus Office 65 user group. But I might just drop the SharePoint at some point, because while it still makes maybe, I don't know, 30-40% of what we're doing so far, chances are that there's a lot more coming in actually, which is not directly related to SharePoint, might just leverage SharePoint. And also actually we had like you said, for example, we had a SharePoint Saturday, so to say, 2 years ago, really SharePoint focused. And you even changed that last year, where we just said, okay, no, we're going to do it a little bit bigger scope, more attendees, bigger everything, and then changed it to the AOS format. So the Azure Office 65 and SharePoint conference format. And big event last year, happening again this year, even bigger, but I think that's the biggest now that will go now, with up to, expecting 150, 200 attendees. And but interest is there.
What's interesting, so we did an Office 365 Saturday event, long name, but we did it when I was still based in the Seattle area. We did it on Microsoft campus. That was in, I think, 2014. So it was I think it was the first one with that branding. It was actually the biggest event that we had done. So it was bigger than the Office 360 or the SharePoint Saturday events. But that was, pre-Teams release, and so it was just, so now you have some different events that are popping up that are very Teams focused. And of course you still have SQL Saturdays, and you have Azure events, you have these kind of cloud events. And it just seems to me like maybe we just need to try and encourage the community and maybe think about rebranding all of that under like Microsoft 365 Friday or Microsoft 365 Saturday. Because that kind of encompasses all those things.
We also had similar issues on a bigger scale here in Singapore. So we've actually got a couple of user groups here, and because Singapore is obviously island state, small, big city, our MVP community is very closely knitted together. So we're always working together, organizing events together, getting together sometimes, etc. So when it then comes to actually we're using actually online platform Meetup for organizing all our events, which means then, you register and you see all the Azure events, SQL events, Office 55, etc. events. And we had the same concern actually. How do we actually call ourselves? We're not the Microsoft community, because that might cause some naming confusion and people thinking, we're officially coming from Microsoft. But we also don't want to call ourselves the Azure community or the SQL community or anything like that. So Microsoft 365 was one of those considerations, and in the end we dropped it because it didn't quite fulfill it, because we also looked at the bigger scope. But obviously it's very difficult these days to just have a very product focused community, because once you start with one thing, even if it's just something as small as Power Apps or Flow, you always in order to start to look at the other things, like if you want to now connect to a SQL database or use Azure, etc., etc. And it's so interconnected these days that our speakers here, for example, or my fellow MVPs here in Singapore, you regularly see them speaking at different user groups, because while their core expertise, maybe let's say Azure, what they bring on the table basically is also really useful for attendees in our Office 365 user group, in the SQL user group, etc., etc.
Well, that's one of the things I hate hearing this after holding an event, and this happened to us again this past year or this year, I guess, with this year's event in February for SharePoint Saturday, that we had people coming up afterwards and said, I didn't think about attending the event because I don't really work on SharePoint anymore. But then I saw all these people, tweeting about sharing out their slides, and they covered all these other topics, and I really should have gone. And it's like that was our decision to look at the rebranding. How do we reach these cross workload audiences? But for exactly that reason, one of the things that we did, and it may not be an answer for what you're experiencing there in Singapore, but we created a meetup called Microsoft User Group Utah. And we're not trying to take over all of the individual user groups. There's still the SharePoint user group. There's the SQL. There's 2 actual SQL user groups. There's a new Power Apps and Flow user group. So each of these different groups, and there's others. I think there's 11 or 12, I think now 12 individual user groups on Microsoft technology. And what we said, this is like a roll-up that, so come and repost your meetup or your Eventbrite or whatever it is on this Mugget page on Meetup, and we'll share all the information. But the idea is that if you register in that one place, can then have visibility into all of the other events that are going on. And we seem to be getting decent traction with it that way. But I guess we'll see in February where we rebrand this event, whether we have that same problem. People just get confused, like, no one shows up because they thought, I didn't know you were going to cover SharePoint. Like, we'll pull our hair out and go back to the building blocks again.
Overall, our experience has been positive. I mean, you've got a lot of people who attend then really multiple user groups very easily, where you see the same person in the Azure user group and the Office 365 user group, and might show also up again for the AI user group. So while there are obviously some other potential issues, in the end, I think having that big umbrella of user groups and people can just go in and see, there's 5 sessions scheduled for next month or so for different user groups, that's really helpful in the end, I think. It really helps our community grow and also remain stable, at least, actually.
Well, is there anything that we can do from a global community to help your local community? Is there, as you look at, topics being covered or, time zones? I know, so here we are, end of my day Friday, your early Saturday morning, just to capture this recording. And that's often like I'll see a couple individuals that are on from Australia or New Zealand that'll be on an early morning call. And I'm realizing that it's like 2-3 in the morning for them to be able to join some of the MVP calls and other things. But is there anything that we can do or to help participate in your local community?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it's to the individual user group organizers. Some of them actually always have a long line of potential speakers. Others, like me, were just trying to see, okay, what can we do in the next 1-2 months or so, because I don't want to present every single month. My other Office Apps and Service MVPs or Office Development MVPs also don't want to stand in front of everyone and do something every single month. We also want to have some variety in speakers, in topics, etc. And that's obviously where something like this comes in quite well. So we previously had, for example, Nikki Borrell, MVP from Germany, also presenting remotely. I mean, that's something that we always keep in mind. Hey, if someone is in Europe, in the US somewhere, and is willing to help us out in some way, we can always see if we can arrange a remote presentation. Time zone is always a bit tricky. Obviously, right now we're, what did we say, 13 hours, 14 hours difference between you and me right now. Right. So we have our meetings in the evening, which means if you're in the US, for example, you might have to get up very early. But anyone who would really be willing to help us here, just reach out to me, and I'll see if I can get you in my user group or any of the others that we have here.
Well, I definitely love to do that. I do a number of virtual events, and we do the same thing for our user group. While we do have a lot of in-person, we try to have guest speakers and topics that we really want covered, and we can just never seem to get people to travel out in this area. Because I mean, you know how it is if there's somebody who is an MVP or just another community member, active, an expert that may not be an MVP, or a Microsoft person that just happens to be in town, and we'll kind of hold a special session. We'll say, hey, you know what? Hey, since you're already here for maybe a client visit or something, we'll put together something, let us know. And that's something that when I travel abroad, especially, I always try to look and see, hey, is there a local user group? Is there anything that's happening around, even if it's just a, get together and do kind of a SharePoint where we, get together, have some beverages and socialize. And so that's always something to do. But hey, I'd love to add me to the list. I would love to do something for your user group. Well, so Rene, people want to find out more about you, get in touch and find out more about what you do and you and your company. What are the best ways to reach you?
Yeah, so obviously, just look for my name anywhere on Google or Bing, Rene Modery. You can find probably dozens of links where I am. So obviously, if you visit my website, modery.net, that's a good starting point. There are direct links to Twitter where I am @Modery. Check me out on LinkedIn. That's where I'm on a daily basis as well anyway. So those are the easiest way to reach me. Yeah.
We'll let you get back to your Saturday morning with the family. But thanks a lot for your time, for joining and letting us get to know you a little bit better. It's good to see you again, talk to you in person. I'll go back to looking at your little picture in Twitter responses.
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me. Talk to you soon again.